My name is Tim. I work at Mikveh Israel. I don't know if you can still see me or not.
I can see you perfectly.
Okay, because I'm also connecting this to our YouTube channel, and I don't know if it takes me off for a minute or what. This is. My name is Tim. I work at Mikveh Israel. I don't know if you can still see me or not.
I can see.
Okay, there we go.
You're all set.
There we go. So how are you doing today?
Okay, this subject interests me. I did a lot of studying on it. I
Good.
grew up in Washington Heights, where we had nothing but German refugees
Mm-hmm.
at the time, and I was.
Well, that's very interesting that you say Washington Heights, because that's where my brother lives. He's been in New York. Hey, Cindy, how are you?
I'm good. I'm glad that it worked this
You're
time.
here. Yes, you are here. It's been a while since I've seen you,
Oh, yeah.
but we're all still coping as best we can.
Mm-hmm.
So we have Norm with us. He's not been with us before. This is a new thing for him.
Boom. Yeah.
We've got about 20 people, I think.
Oh, good.
Sorry about that. I dropped something.
I've been using Zoom for an exercise class also from the Asbury Methodist.
Oh, okay. Very
They
good.
have a great class at 11 o'clock on Thursday morning.
Mm-hmm.
That's open to anybody who wants to just click on. So
Right. Well, you know what? There's so much that you can do with Zoom. It's pretty amazing.
It's unbelievable.
It really is. I mean, we have meetings with friends who live, still in other states. Every now and then I have a Zoom conference with my brothers who live all over the place so that we can stay in touch and keep up with what's going on and all of that. And interestingly enough, this weekend, we're doing a virtual Zoom wine tasting with a winery out in California.
wow.
Good.
They send you the packet. They're overnight it. We'll get here tomorrow. And it's got all the samples of wine and everything else in it. You just put it in the refrigerator. And then on Friday, you open it up and they lead you through the tasting. There's going to be several of us. We've got some friends that are doing it as well. They explain the wine to you. You talk about it a little bit. It's a new thing. We decided it might be a kind of fun thing to do with some friends. So we'll see.
I think that would work very well.
Right.
As long as you got the wine.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, they sent a tracker on it, and it says it's guaranteed to be here tomorrow. So we'll see.
Great.
Like I said, there's just so many people have to be creative, nowadays to, given the situation. And unfortunately, the numbers on the virus are heading back up instead of heading down.
Texas had 1 million. They had hit 1 million cases today in Texas.
Yeah. And then countries in Europe are also, some of the countries in Europe are going back on a sort of lockdown kind of thing again. I know Belgium is, I know parts of the UK, some places in Spain, Portugal. It's just when you think you have it a little bit under control, and then you don't,
Only put it this way: only 1 out of 20 people did not wake up from it.
Right. Well, it's interesting because I saw today that Pfizer, one of the companies that's working on a vaccine, released evidence that the vaccine they're working on, I know there's different companies working on it, but their vaccine they have found to be 90% effective.
Oh.
And I don't know whether that means they're going to be getting ready to release it soon or not.
Talking about some various people who get it first, including health workers and people like me who are approaching 90.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
great.
Well, hopefully it gets out there sooner rather than later because, we need it, and maybe we can finally start to put it behind us at that point. I don't know, but we'll see.
Well, the last epidemic we had was, of course, 1917, 1918, and
Right.
it killed 100,000 people.
It did. It really did, you know, and the numbers keep going up, unfortunately. Hopefully we can stop it before it gets much worse. Somebody else coming in here.
Turn it a little louder.
Nancy,
Huh?
Hello?
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 We're here. We can't
Good.
see you, but we can.
Well, Jules had me turn the audio off. I mean, the video off. Now let me see if I can get it back again.
There should be a little like camera icon down on the lower left. And if you click on that, it should allow your video to come back up.
All right, wait a minute. Where, Jules?
Oh,
There we go.
Somebody else.
There we go. There you are. But now I can't hear you. You have to unmute yourself now. So you have to go now to the little microphone and click on the microphone at the bottom. Oh, the Zoom stuff.
Made it easier for me. My wife just got off a virtual Hadassah meeting.
There you go. There you go.
how did the food festival go? Did they make some money on that?
Yes, they were very, you know, given what we, you know, very scaled back
Mhm.
from what we normally do. They sold out of just about everything.
Oh,
There
good.
was nothing left. We had a meeting, a staff meeting this morning, and Jennifer said that, you know, we did turn a profit, a nice profit, clearly not as much as normal had we had the normal food fest, but they were happy with it. People liked the convenience of being able to go online and put their order in.
Mhm.
So that was very, very successful for people. And they're putting, I think by the end of the week, they're supposed to have everything related to Hanukkah up so that people can shop online if they want to and order if they need, you know, Hanukkah candles or are looking for gifts or something for
Yeah.
people. So they've been working on that as another, you know, way to kind of get things out there. It's just been so strange being back at work in the building, you know, and it was always such a busy place because of the museum and people coming and going and the doorbell ringing, and you could hear, you know, even though we were behind the glass, you could hear bits and pieces of the tours that were going through the museum. And now it's just so quiet, you know, it's just almost too quiet for my taste. I kind of liked the bustling activity when everybody, you know, was around.
Yeah, so would I.
You know, it's hopefully, you know, there'll be a point when we can get back to that. I don't have the answer, certainly. There's Andrea.
Hi there.
There's
Hi,
David.
Cheryl. Hi, Bruce.
Hello, everybody. Cindy, we're only seeing the top of your head. I don't know why, and your glasses occasionally.
Is
There
that-
you go. There you are in full.
Yeah, it was the angle of the
Right.
the cover for them.
Right. So hopefully everybody's doing well. We've got quite a group coming in, so you know there's going to be ding dong people coming in for quite a while. And you know me, and there's Mark, and he's new with us, and I think that's Jamie down there in the corner.
Yeah,
Also, how are you doing? How's the baby?
she's good. She's wait, she's right here.
Oh my goodness. Very cute, very cute. And
Yep.
how's Daryl?
He's doing good. That test actually wound up being positive, so we were glad
Good.
to see.
Good. Kara is here. Mark is here. We got some people who are new, who've not been with us before, which is great. And I believe that's Carol and Mark, if I'm not mistaken. See, I realize that everybody sees the configuration of people in a different order. If I say so-and-so is up in the top right corner, on your screen, they may not be in the top right corner. I thought everybody saw it the same way, but then I was doing something on here and I'm like, oh, everybody, it's not like the Brady Bunch where everybody was always in the same spot. So, I may see you in a lower corner or an upper corner, but everyone else may be seeing you.
Shelley.
Maury and Shelley. Yeah.
Hello.
This is a lot of the crew from some of the past
Oh, yeah.
classes that we've done.
Hey, I just have to say, my husband's got one good looking wiener.
What? Oh, we have a baby on board today. We have a dog.
Okay.
I'm just attracting all, such an eclectic group here. So, but it's good to see everybody. It's been a while. Some of you, I think, our last classes were before the High Holy Days that we did.
Yeah.
And then we took a break for the High Holy Days and all of that. Now we're back. And then, of course, I'll be doing Judaism 101 again, starting in January. I don't know. We have a lot of, we were planning Hanukkah. We're going to do a Zoom Hanukkah thing, which is, you'll hear about, where we're going to try to get as many people on Zoom lighting the menorah at the same time.
Oh, that is so cool.
So every square, people will get to see your particular menorah, whether you have traditional or modern, or, some people with children may have the sports related, or Winnie the Pooh or Disney or something like that. So it'll be kind of fun to see everybody's menorahs and lighting and, doing the blessings. I think Kelly's going to have, a few songs, Hanukkah songs to sing. So it'd be kind of cool. We have all these little squares of people on Zoom lighting a menorah all at one time.
Is this going to be the first night or every night, or how?
I think they're going to do that the Friday night, which is the second night, actually, because the first candle is December 10th. So the second candle is Shabbat. It's December 11th. So I think they're going to do it for then. And then the rabbi, now again, this isn't finalized and I probably shouldn't be saying anything. The rabbi was thinking about doing outside the synagogue with the big menorah, having people come down to Monterey Square on the 8th night, because you'll be lighting all of it. It's pretty, and it's cool, and doing a little something outside so people can socially distance and, whatever, and just have a chance to schmooze and talk a little bit. So that's kind of in the works, just to, it's the holiday season. It's going to be very odd for all of us this year. I mean, it's not going to be what we're used to, it's, I mean, some people may be traveling, some people won't be traveling, just interesting. So, Thanksgiving even, I mean, people are used to having big groups of people for Thanksgiving, for dinner, and I don't know how many people are going to do it or not do it, Anyway, so, all right, 6:31, my policy, I give everybody till 6:35 to get in.
Hi, Isaiah.
Right, they may have trouble finding a parking place, so got to cut them a little bit. So they may be out there finding a parking spot, so, just in case. The one thing about Zoom is you don't have to worry about parking. That's, which sometimes can be a problem.
Or wearing shoes and socks.
Pardon me?
Wearing shoes and socks. I've gotten so used to walking around barefoot.
Yeah. Well, you can be barefoot now. Nobody's going to know unless you put your feet up on the table where people can do.
Mark didn't have any pants on, and I said, please put some pants on. He's like, why? And I said, what if you have to stand up for some reason? And he's like, well, that's a good point. So he went and put some pants on.
Thank you.
I agree with you totally.
But I mean, it is true. I mean, I know friends of mine who are in professional positions, business type things. And they said, I put a shirt and tie on, but, I can still have my running shorts on the bottom because nobody sees. Of course, there is the problem. If all of a sudden you forgot something and you have to get it, then whoops. But you can stop your video. You could turn your video off, but people forget.
That's true.
People forget. I forget to turn mine off sometimes. Not that I care, but, But yes, but I have pants on just in case if I do get up. So don't worry.
Good to know.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I forgot anything, but like I said, and those of you who've taken classes with me before, we're all in our homes. So if you have to let the dog out, feel free to get up and let the dog out, or you got to go feed the cat or let the cat in or out, or need to get up and get a drink of water or something stronger if you want to. You're in your own home, you're not driving, so who cares? A glass of wine or something, perfectly acceptable. Or you just need to get up and stretch your legs, that's okay too. It's the one thing about being in your house, you need to get up and use the restroom, get up and use the restroom. So we keep it, pretty easygoing here. So I don't know, like I said, I'm gonna give everybody a couple more minutes before we get started. Hopefully all of you were able to get the outline and handouts that I emailed. It's really hard to cut down. There is so much material out there, to figure out what to include. I could have sent you, 15, 20, 25 handouts. There's so much. And, but I realize you don't want that many in your inbox. And that's a lot of printing, unless you read it online. I'm not good at reading online. I have to print out when I need to really read something. So I'm going to try to keep each session to maybe just 3, 4 at max handouts, just so I don't totally inundate your email box. A couple of other quick things as people are signing in. This is a 3-part class. The Zoom numbers will stay the same for all 3 parts. I will send a reminder out when I send out Monday's outline and handouts of the numbers in case you lost them or forgot them, but it will be the same. It's set up to be the same numbers for all 3 sessions. So you'll be able to sign in with the same thing every single week. The other thing is, before we get started, this is 3 sessions, but I want to make clear that entire semesters of college courses cover this subject. There is so much that has been written from so many different points of view and angles. This is going to be more thorough. Those of you who've taken Judaism 101 with me, we cover it. This is going to be a little bit more thorough than Judaism 101, but still, I'm going to preface this by saying it's an overview. I tried to cover the major things as best I could. There will be things that I don't cover, can't cover, we don't have time to cover. I will be giving or sending you a bibliography at the end of the class as well, with further reading that you might want to do, and other places if there's certain parts of the subject that you want to dig into a little bit more. So that will be coming for all of you as well. So it's 6:35, so I am going to get started. We may have some other people who join late, that's fine. I'm going to mute everybody like I always do. If you want to stop me for a question or whatever, wave at me. And if I don't see you waving, because I might not, because I've got a lot of squares in front of me here, and they're not that big. So if I don't see you waving, just unmute yourself. Don't forget to unmute yourself and just say, excuse me, could I ask a question or something like that? I'm perfectly okay with that as well, because like I said, I've got a lot of squares of people in front of me. Welcome to all of you that I've had in class before. It's good to see you again. For those of you who are joining us for the class for the first time, glad to have you with us. Hopefully you'll learn something. So anyway, we're going to get started. As I said, this is today's session. Session 1 is going to really focus pretty much on how did it come to be that something like the Holocaust could happen? Something as horrible as the Holocaust doesn't just begin in a vacuum. People don't just wake up one day and say, well, we're going to pick out a particular group of people and there's going to be mass genocide. There have to be certain conditions, as there have been historically in other cases where we have seen genocide, that sort of lay the foundation, that lay the groundwork for something as horrific, as horrendous, for the Holocaust to happen. So that's kind of what today we're really going to look at. What was going on in Germany? What was going on that allowed Hitler and the Nazi Party to step in and take control? People don't realize that in most of what Hitler did to get into power was done perfectly legally. It was a legal thing. He wasn't doing underhanded things. He worked the legal system to his advantage, as you will see. And then also, what was Jewish life like in Germany before the 1930s, Hitler coming to power? So what was happening with Jewish life in Germany at that time? So we're going to take some time to look at all of that today to sort of see where the foundations of the Holocaust come from. So we're going to start by looking at Germany after World War I. So World War I ends, Germany is defeated by the Allied powers. And the first thing you need to understand is that within the country of Germany, the German people themselves, not just the government, not just the military, really did not want to accept defeat. They did not want to accept the fact that they had lost this major conflict. So the idea of being on the losing side was highly unpopular with the general public. It was difficult for them to digest the fact that they had lost the war. So you're coming into this attitude of, disbelief, of not wanting to accept the inevitable. But the fact was the Allies prevailed and Germany lost. So the Treaty of Versailles, the treaty that ends World War I. It is, and historians that go back and study this use usually one word. It was harsh. It was very harsh in the conditions that it put on Germany. Now, granted, Germany is the loser here. So they're going to have to, I guess, pay the consequences of the world conflict. But most historians will say it was unduly harsh on Germany. So how was it harsh? It was a completely punitive treaty. Most treaties try, when we look at World War II, there were the Allies trying to help Germany get back on its feet after the defeat of World War II. It was not the case in World War I. It was very punitive. Germany, for example, was forced to disarm completely. They were not allowed to have a military, so to speak, to defend themselves, which was something that they prided themselves on. And the Allies basically said, no, there will be no military might in Germany, so you must disarm the country completely. Second thing that Germany faced was a major loss of territory. Germany lost territories on the east, they lost them in the west, they lost them pieces to Denmark in the north. Germany, it shrank. After World War I, the country of Germany on the map looked very different. It was much, much smaller than it had been. And so that was humiliating, to have to give up territory, to have to give up land to other nations that became part of Poland, part of Denmark, part of France, etc. That had been part of Germany for many, many years. One of the worst things that happened to Germany was they were going to have to pay reparations, money, and I mean a lot of money, billions, to all the Allied nations to pay back for what had happened during World War I. So the Allies imposed these payments on Germany. Here you have a country that, like much of Europe, was devastated by the war, and now you are expecting them to make these huge payments to the Allied nations for the destruction. And while it might sound fair that, well, okay, you have to make good on the destruction, the amounts, the sums were pretty much, most historians again will say, were undoable. So here's Germany facing loss. Here's Germany facing this treaty that is extremely, extremely harsh conditions for the nation of Germany. Really crushed them, crushed their pride, crushed their honor. And it was something that, as I said, the German people just really did not want to accept. Another problem in Germany was Germany had not been a democracy. So now they're going to be a new democracy, something they had not ever dealt with or handled before. So now we're putting a government here that was not something that Germany really had any history in. They had no history with democracy. There were all these little fringe revolutionary groups that were vying for control. So they succeeded in overthrowing the emperor. of Germany. So now there is really sort of this void of leadership. So we come in and we put a democracy in place. It's called the Weimar Republic, named after the German city of Weimar. It is modeled similarly to an American democracy where there will be a president, but there's also a chancellor. And there are two houses, like we have two houses of Congress. In the Reichstag. So we are trying to set up a sort of American style democracy, a Western style democracy in a country that had no history of democracy. So that was going to be a problem. The economy in Germany was a shambles, a shambles. For lack of a better word, that's all you can say. The economy was just falling apart. Inflation was ridiculous. They said it was crippling inflation in Germany. For example, if you wanted to go to a German market and you just needed to buy a loaf of bread because you wanted to make some sandwiches for yourself or for your family, your children, there were instances of people taking a wheelbarrow, heaping it with German marks, like overflowing the paper marks, going to the market, and they would get one loaf of bread because the money was worthless. It was worthless. So you have this crippling inflation. There was a 35% unemployment rate in Germany at this time. So 35% of those who were in the workforce could not find jobs, could not find employment. So not only was the money pretty useless, there were actually people in Germany who said that the money was worth more if they burned it in their stoves and ovens for heat than it was trying to buy anything with it. So you've got inflation, you've got many, many people out of work. This is the early 1920s. Now, luckily for Germany, by the late 20s, things in the economy did start to improve, but then we know what's going to happen at the end of the 1920s. We know there's a Great Depression looming in the offing. So they get this brief recovery in the late 20s, only to have everything come crashing down one more time in 29 when the Great Depression hits. The Allied nations did really nothing to help Germany in this case. Why? Britain and France had their own internal problems going on. So they were pretty much trying to solve their own issues in both France and in the UK. So they could not be bothered with Germany. They could not be bothered with what was going on in Germany. You lost the war, here's the treaty, deal with it. Just deal with it. We can't come in and monitor you or oversee you and help you to get on your feet. In the United States, there had been, after the war, which was devastating, and the many that suffered and the many that died, America, the United States, went into a period of isolationism. The people in the country said, that's it, we're done. We went over across the sea, we fought a war, we lost soldiers, it was devastating. We want no part of any of that anymore. So isolationism. So we too were kind of just trying to take care of ourselves. We weren't going to worry about what was going on in Germany. We weren't going to worry what was going on in Europe because we had ourselves to worry about. We had ourselves to take care of. So this isolationist attitude was very prevalent in the 1920s. And so that was, Germany, you're on your own. There's not really much that we can do to help you. There was a British politician / historian who said, when you look at the Treaty of Versailles, and the way he put it, he says it was a peace treaty. Yes, it was. But and this is a quote from him, he said, it was a peace built on quicksand. A peace built on quicksand. And we all know what happens with quicksand. We all know what happens. Things begin to sink. They begin to sink even more. And that was his way of putting what was going on in Germany at that time. So what is the end result of all of this economic problem, the isolationism in the world, the harsh Treaty of Versailles that imposed all these conditions on Germany? People who really were very, very disheartened by the fact that their country had lost. So what is the end result of all this? This creates a perfect scenario it couldn't be better. A perfect scenario, a perfect stage, if you will, for a man who had been homeless, for a man who had been, at best, by his own evaluations of his military leaders, a mediocre soldier at best during World War I, a man who fashioned himself wanting to be an artist and an art student, but summarily failed and flunked out of art school. It was going to make the scenario for this man, who we will come to know as Adolf Hitler, ripe for power, because Germany was looking for something, and Germany needed something. And when you have this sort of horrible situation of depression, of bad economy, leadership that is weak, the Weimar government, because they had no history of democracy, was a weak democracy, all the conditions become right for someone with, and people don't want to hear this, someone with charisma. And you might think Hitler had charisma. Well, at the time, they certainly thought that he did. Someone who could whip people into a frenzy with speeches that were just so filled with emotion. Find a clip, if you can, of Hitler giving a speech on YouTube. Doesn't matter whether you understand German, doesn't matter whether it's even translated, below in subtitles. Just watch him speak. Watch and listen to the inflections of his voice. He could pull people in because he would get so utterly worked up and so into what he was talking about. It was right for someone to come in and hold national pep rallies. And I don't say that to diminish anything. When you look at the pictures of Nazi rallies, they are like these huge people marching and chanting like for their favorite football team, and the fires and the torches and the flags and the uniforms and everything. It created this illusion that had been lost, this illusion of greatness, this illusion of things are going to be great again. So part of what happens with Hitler here is he's in the right place at the right time. He's got the rest of the world ignoring what's happening in Germany because they're so caught up in their own thing. They're so caught up in isolationism that they can't be bothered with what's going on in Germany. And as I said, as we're going to see now, Hitler uses a lot of very legal means to finally work his way up. He doesn't just show up one day and say, here I am, I'm your leader, let's go, I'm the dictator. No, it doesn't happen like that. He takes his time moving his way up till he ultimately gets himself at the grand prize where he becomes the dictator of Germany. Yes, you have a question? You're gonna have to unmute yourself to ask a question, just on the little microphone. Because I don't think I can do it for you.
I can.
There you go.
It wasn't all legal. He was thrown in jail.
Oh, we're gonna get to that.
Okay.
No, we're gonna get to that.
Okay, I just wanted to.
Yeah, I'm gonna talk about Hitler in jail for sure. He was in jail. Okay, let's move into the second part here. Let's talk about the rise of Adolf Hitler and Nazism and how, including in his jail sentence, this kind of happens and how he finally works his way up to the leadership and becomes dictator in Germany. So Hitler joins what at the time is known as the German Workers, this is how he gets to start, the German Workers' Party. He joins this rather small party in 1918. There are all these small little revolutionary parties that are communists, that are socialists, some are democratic, some want to bring the monarchy back. And you have this little group called the German Workers' Party. And it's 1918, and Hitler is among the first to join this rather ragtag group of very nationalistic looking outlook that want to work their way into the government, like so many other groups are trying to work their way into the government. So that's 1918, it's where Hitler starts. By 1920, 2 years later, the German Workers' Party is no longer the German Workers' Party. It becomes known as the National Socialist German Workers' Party. That's a long name. The National Socialist German Workers' Party. So where do we get Nazi? Well, in German, and I know a little bit of German, you say National Socialist German Workers' Party, Nationalsozialistischen Deutsche Arbeiterspartei. Try to do that 10 times fast. The word national in German is National. So you take off the last part of national in German and you're left with Nazi. Hence a much shorter term, a much shorter name for a very long mouthful of a party. So we now have a new name. It's 1920. The party is still relatively small. It is not winning over, all kinds of new people joining early on. Yes, it's growing. The other parties are growing. There were conflicts in the streets of Germany at the beginning between some of the parties, insurrections where they would meet on the streets and it could get, a little bit violent. So Hitler decides that what really, really needs to be done is somebody needs to really ramp up the propaganda. So he just says to the party, I will take charge of the propaganda arm of the Nazi party. And, since nobody else seems to be stepping forward to do it, so it's going to be his job to get the word out about what the Nazis are, who they are, what they stand for. So he's going to be in charge of all of the Nazi propaganda starting in 1920. In 1921, he does his job so well that in 1921, they proclaim Adolf Hitler to be the leader of the party. So now he is the leader of the Nazi party. So he starts very early on as just another schlep in the party. He takes over the propaganda arm of the party, and within another year, he is now the leader of this party, which is still relatively small. But they're making noise. He's trying to get the word out there. They're trying to bring more people in. And now we're going to get to what gets Hitler in trouble and gets him thrown in jail. So it's called the Beer Hall Putsch. In 1923, these Nazis, the ragtag group that they were, because they were not still highly organized at this point, they decide that they are going to step in and they are going to illegally overthrow the government of the state of Bavaria. Bavaria is one of the states in Germany. So they make this attempt. They're in Munich, which was the capital of the state of Bavaria. So they're in the city of Munich. This begins in literally a beer hall or a pub, if you will, and it fails miserably. It really doesn't go anywhere. Hitler is arrested along with many of his other fellow party members for illegally attempting a coup on the state government of Bavaria, and Hitler is summarily thrown in jail. So yes, illegal, because this was an illegal act on the part of Hitler and his ragtag party. So he is given a 5-year prison sentence. So we're talking end of 23, that would keep him in prison till 1928, 5 years off the streets, if you will, 5 years where he can't be out organizing, he can't be out pulling more people into the party. However, he only serves 9 months and then he's let out of jail. So out of his 5-year sentence, he serves 9 months in prison and then he is let out of jail. So, maybe he was a model prisoner, I don't know. But they let him out of jail after 9 months. So he, I guess, fortunate for him that he doesn't have to serve his full 5-year sentence. However, while he is in jail, he takes the time, while he's there, he's got a lot of time on his hands, to write a book. And that book is Mein Kampf, which means my struggle in German. It means my struggle. So he writes this while he's in prison. I don't know if any of you have ever read pieces of it, all of it, parts of it, paragraphs from it. I had to read excerpts. I've never read the whole thing. I had to read excerpts of it when I was in college for a class I was in. And, you know, I'm an English major. I was an English teacher. I taught literature and writing. If I were giving a grade to the writing of Mein Kampf, it would be at best a D-. It's very wordy. It's very kind of overblown. But what it does do is it clearly outlines Hitler's ideas, his mission for what he sees as the future of Germany, and included in that is his view of the Jews. So anybody who wants to say we really didn't know what Hitler's attitude toward the Jews was, well, he made it quite clear in Mein Kampf in 1925. Now, when the book was published, to be quite honest, it would be by all standards, it was not selling off of Amazon in droves. Not that they didn't have Amazon back then, but it wasn't selling well. But as Hitler was out of jail now, and he continued to make a name for himself, sales began to increase. And pretty soon the book was selling more. It was being featured in displays in German bookstores. So while it was a major flop at the beginning, ultimately, he was able to get it out there in the hands of people. People did read it. People could see what his plan was. And as I said, his goal was to make Germany great again. He wanted Germany to regain the lost glory days, or the lost glory that had been denied it when they lost World War I. And so in spite of all the anti-Semitism there, and there were people who read it and said, well, you know, he says that, but you know, he probably isn't going to really do anything about it. It's just something, you know. So people were very willing to sort of overlook the parts of Mein Kampf that they didn't really like and just look at, wow, maybe we can be a great nation again. Maybe we can be a great nation like we were one more time. So as I said, he's more visible. He's back on the streets now. He is trying to whip up more people to join the Nazi party. Oh, also in the book is his whole idea of the super Aryan race. You know, his racial theory, which we'll talk more about as well to the next session. But his whole racial theory on this master race, this super Aryan race of people, is also clearly defined in Mein Kampf. So he wasn't hiding. He wasn't like putting this stuff secretly somewhere. The anti-Semitism is there. The master race theory is there. The idea that Germany could be great again, it's all there. It's all in the book. Not very well written, but it's all in the book. And one of the last things that Mein Kampf makes very, very clear, and you can pretty much guess where this is coming from, is that the only way that Germany was going to be great again, the only way was with a strong armed leader. A strong armed leader was going to have to take the reins and pull Germany back to its past glories. And I'm sure in his own head, he was already thinking that that would be himself. And this is, of course, you hear, you know, him called the Führer, you know, in German. And this is where this idea of this one strong armed leader, the Führer, came from. The idea that if Germany's ever going to be great again, in the government, even in local state governments, they rarely could get enough to get a majority in local governments, let alone on a national level. So they were not the party that was all of a sudden coming out of nowhere and filling the seats, you know, with Nazi party members. They were always a relatively small party. And then, as I said earlier, the late 20s, for a few years, Germany's economy gets better. The minute Germany's economy gets better, people stop paying attention to Hitler and the Nazis. They turn their attentions away from him because they don't need him now. He's not promising something that they can't see for themselves. Oh, the economy's getting better. Oh, we're doing better in our daily lives. Oh, Germany's looking like it's on the up and up again. We don't need Hitler now. So actually, Nazi party membership and their representation in government actually declines in the late 20s. And had that continued to happen, they would be a mere footnote in world history, in German history, and we probably would not even give them much more than 5 or 10 minutes. But that wasn't the way that it was going to turn out, as we know. While the party is declining, Hitler's not sitting back and just, wringing his hands and saying, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? Hitler's been thinking this through. So he starts the Hitler Youth, which is, for a parallel, sort of like a Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts kind of thing, to bring young people, start indoctrinating them when they are young. And so joining the Hitler Youth, and you got a uniform, and you were a part of something. There were rallies, there were outings, there were vacations out of the city to the countryside. So there were all kinds of pluses and perks to joining the Hitler Youth. And he starts the Schutzstaffel, which is more easily called the SS. Because Schutzstaffel, for those of us who don't speak German, is a bit of a mouthful. So he also starts the SS, his sort of policing arm of the Nazi party. And he starts it with 200 willing men who sign up to be a part of this new SS. The most interesting thing about the SS, or one of the most interesting things, is, okay, so they're supposed to be helping Germany to become this great nation. When they take their oath to join the SS, the oath of loyalty is not to Germany. No. They swear an oath of loyalty to Hitler. Not to the nation, they swear the oath of loyalty to Hitler. So by joining the SS, they are not swearing any kind of allegiance to the country to make the country great again. They are signing an allegiance and an oath to Hitler to make Hitler great. So it's very, very fascinating. I mean, again, clearly he's got his ideas here. And by the early 1930s, what started with 200 becomes thousands. Because once the Depression hits, once 1929 hits, once the economy starts to go down the tubes, then this is something that people are starting to join in much larger numbers than they were prior. So what starts at 200 now numbers in the thousands by the early 1930s. And again, Hitler gave them the trappings of uniforms and marches and flags, and people who joined felt like they belonged. They felt like they belonged to something that mattered. And we can't stress how important that is to people, especially when people are feeling sort of downtrodden. They want to feel important. They want to feel that they belong to something. They belong to something bigger, better, greater. And so to them, I'm part of something that's bigger, better, and greater. And so that was the attraction here. And so people were signing up. They were taking their oath of loyalty to Hitler, thinking that, of course, they were going to be part of creating a greater Germany again, because who knew what was actually down the road? Okay, anybody have questions at this point before we go into Hitler now going to go into big time power? Yes, Rena, unmute yourself, please. Rena, unmute, I can't hear you. Still can't hear you. Trying to see if I have any control over here, but I really don't.
Okay, got it.
There you go. There you go.
Where did they get the money to fund all these uniforms and starting all these groups? And they needed money. Where did the money come from?
Well, they were given some money because they were a political party, and so some funding did come from the legal German government, and they would take donations. Hitler was very good at fundraising, and people who joined the SS, and there was a fee, to join the Hitler Youth, so that they did have some sources of funding to keep everything going, to keep the programming going. Even in the midst of the Depression, if you tell people you're going to be part of something, but it's going to cost you a little bit here, it's going to cost you a little bit there, people scraped together what they had and they paid it. Crazily enough, maybe, but they paid it.
Tim?
Any other questions? Yes.
did the existing German government, was that under Hindenburg?
Yes.
Did they have an alternate plan at the time? In other words, was there sort of a debate over which way, sort of like the, I hate to use the word, the Trump-Biden debates as far as which way the economy should go, how to get us out of this, how to make Germany successful again? Did they have an opposing?
They did. It was very weak. The Weimar government was weak from the get-go. It never was able to gain strength. They could not keep, as you're going to see in a minute, they had a revolving door on the chancellorship. Nobody could keep the job because nobody could come up with good solutions. So while the people were clamoring for solutions, the government was able to come up with nothing to satisfy what the people were clamoring for, which again would open the door for someone else to come in and say, okay, your government isn't helping you, they're not doing anything for you, but I can do something for you. It's one of the biggest problems that Germany had was this very, very weak central government, this Weimar government, that just could never really get its act together and come up with any solutions. Had they had somebody who was more akin to perhaps FDR in the United States and some of the programming, it might have been different. But unfortunately, waiting in the wings in Germany was Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party.
Did Hitler get many of the defections from the Weimar government?
I'm sorry.
Or were they totally new people? Did he get many defections from?
Oh, there were people coming over to the Nazis from various parties because the Nazis were offering them something. The Nazis were promising them something. So people who had been social democrats or Christian democrats or had been part of wanting to restore the monarchy and so on were then coming over. And this is why the numbers of the SS begin to grow exponentially, because Hitler said, look, I can give you this. They're giving you nothing, but I can give you this. Yes, Jeff? Jeff.
Yeah, Tim, his first semi-military group was the SA,
right,
and that preceded the SS.
Right, but then he realized they weren't militant enough for him.
Yeah, but they were the initial organizers, right. The crowd,
right,
and the leg breakers.
Oh yes, but they'll be small potatoes compared to the SS.
Later on, yes.
Yes. All right, anything else, or we can move on? Because let's talk about how Hitler finally gets himself to the top level position. So as his power begins, the first thing Hitler decides to do is to run for the presidency. In 1932, Hitler puts himself out there as the Nazi Party candidate for the presidency. He is running against Hindenburg, who is old. I believe at the time Hindenburg was about 89 years old or close to it. He was not a strong leader. He was old, he was ineffective, he was weak, but in spite of all that, he was beloved by the people. So even though Hindenburg was a weak leader, people did have this soft spot in their hearts for this older man. So in the election of Hitler running for the presidency in 1932, he loses. He loses. He only got 36% of the vote. And so he loses. And Hindenburg is reelected. Okay, in spite of the fact that his government is very, very weak, the people couldn't say no. They voted him in again. Now, the chancellorship. Germany has what's called a chancellor. Some countries have a prime minister, etc. The chancellor is the one with the real power in Germany. The president is more of the figurehead, kind of represents the nation, but the real power in Germany, the way the democracy was set up in Weimar, was where the chancellorship would have the power. That was more the decision-making along with the houses in the Reichstag, the houses that would vote on things. The chancellor had a lot more power than the president. So that's really where the seat of power was. In the space of 1 year, and again, this is what I was talking about earlier, in the space of 1 year, there were 3 different chancellors under Hindenburg. Nobody lasted for more than a couple months. Again, weak government. Nobody could come up with an answer. Nobody could make deals with the governing bodies. And so chancellor would resign and someone else would come in. A couple more months, the chancellor would resign and someone else would come in. Just playing up the weakness of the Weimar government. So a fateful thing happened. So now we're in the early 30s. The country is not doing well economically. Hindenburg is old and weak. They can't keep anybody in the position of chancellor. So in January of 1933, President Hindenburg, in his old age, appoints Hitler as the chancellor. The chancellor. So it's a perfectly legal thing for him to be appointed. Part of the reason, because they had this revolving door and no one could hold on to the job. As I said, they were offering no solutions out of the Great Depression. The other reason, when Hindenburg made this decision in consultation with other people, they felt like Hitler was getting a little above himself. And they felt like if we put him in this position, we can keep an eye on him, we can see what he's doing, we can watch what he's doing, and we can kind of keep him under our thumb. Now, that was a bad move.
Right.
It was a very bad move. But nonetheless, in January of 1933, Hitler takes over the chancellorship of Germany. On January 30th, at the end of that very same month, so he's not even in the chancellor's job 1 month yet, he makes a speech declaring the birth of the Third Reich. You've heard Germany called during this time Third Reich. The third, that means the Third Empire, if you will. And Hitler proclaims that this Third Empire of Germany, this Third Reich, will last for 1,000 years. So he frequently refers to it as the 1,000-year Reich, the 1,000-year empire. God is good and God is gracious because it didn't last that long, and we can all be thankful for that. Far from it. But that was what was in Hitler's idea, that this new Reich, this new Third Reich in Germany is going to be in power for 1,000 years. So you can see he's not wasting any time getting his message out there. You know, you gave me this job as chancellor. I'm proclaiming that we're going to have a 1,000-year empire now moving forward. And of course, this is what the people wanted to hear. He was speaking to the people who needed something because they were getting nothing. All right, so let's move on. The Enabling Act. The Enabling Act, very important. March 23rd, 1933. So again, we're just moving ahead, January, February, March. So on March 23, 1933, the Enabling Act is passed by the German government. What is the Enabling Act? It gives full governmental power to Hitler and the Nazi Party. To Hitler and the Nazi Party. Hindenburg is still there. Hindenburg is still the president. Hindenburg becomes basically nothing more than a figurehead now, because with the Enabling Act, we are moving toward strict dictatorship. And it won't be much longer till it will be a strict dictatorship. Let's move forward. In July of 1933, so again, March, April, May, June, July, we're only moving ahead 5 months. The Nazi Party is declared the only legal political party in Germany. So now we're going to a one-party state. So by July of 1933, the Nazi Party is the only legal political party. All other political parties are outlawed, and the leaders of many of those political parties are thrown in jail. So if you want to continue to be a socialist Democrat or Christian Democrat or monarchist or whatever, you're going to have to do so secretly, because to belong to any other political party was illegal. And again, I'm condensing a lot of very difficult history here, just so you know that. At this time, Hitler just also thumbs his nose at the Treaty of Versailles, and he begins to militarize Germany. Remember, Germany could not militarize under the conditions of the Treaty of Versailles. And Hitler says, you know what, too bad. We don't care about that treaty anymore. We don't care. France, the US, Britain have their own issues, their own problems with economy and unemployment. So we're just going to start militarizing. And he did. He started militarizing the country once again. Germany had always been proud of its strong military, was very upset when it was taken away by the treaty after World War I, And Hitler says, well, we're not going to do that anymore. We are going to militarize. We are going to bring back our military. The other thing he does at the same time is he takes Germany out of the League of Nations. The League of Nations was kind of the forerunner to the United Nations later on, but there was a League of Nations started after World War I to hopefully get countries to work together, cooperate, whatever. Germany, Hitler said, we're not going to be a part of that anymore. We're stepping away from the League of Nations. We're just taking ourselves out. So there's a lot of warning signs out here for where Germany is headed. But as I just said, things are going on in the US, things are going on in France, things are going on in Britain. They're still trying to recover from the Great Depression. There is still very much this idea of isolationism out there. And so Hitler's kind of just moving his way rather unchecked through all of these various moves as he solidifies his power. So the Enabling Act, militarization, Hitler is moving forward, and he's moving forward, again, doing nothing at this point that's really illegal, nothing. So he's gone from, one of the first members of this party in 1918 to now he is in power. It is the only party, the only legal political party. He is the Chancellor of Germany. And then something that really, really is the last sort of thing that Hitler was waiting for happens. President Hindenburg passes away. The death of President Hindenburg on August 2nd, 1934, is really the last thing that was sort of standing in Hitler's way. As long as Hindenburg was alive, Hitler did still try to pay respect to him, still tried to deal with him because he was an old army general who, as I said, was beloved by the people. So Hitler did show him, elements of respect. Hitler did try to, include him, even though the Nazi party is now the only party. Hitler knew that if he treated Hindenburg unfairly, if he treated him with disrespect, that was not going to go down well. That was not going to sit well with the people of Germany. So he continued to be very respectful. But he knew that Hindenburg was old. He knew that Hindenburg had been in ill health. He knew that it was only going to be a matter of time before this beloved old man was going to pass away. And so on August 2nd, 1934, Hindenburg passes away, and Hitler wastes very, very little time in declaring himself both president and chancellor. So now Hitler has the two top offices in the country. And there's really not much to stop him. He's got the only political party in the country. He has the two top offices in the country, even though the Nazis never, ever received a plurality of the vote. In any election up to that point, there had never been a plurality of Nazi party put into the government. So he was able to do this all the time while being a minority party. He just had the chance, the cards sort of fell his way, if you will, where things that happened allowed him to take one more step toward power and then one more step toward power to now, in essence, he is a dictator and Germany is a fascist nationalistic state. But wanting to be fair, or at least on the surface, let's say, look fair, Hitler said, but you know what, the people should vote on this. I think the people need to have a chance to vote either yes or no, they approve or they disapprove on whether I should be both chancellor and president. So let's let the people have their voice. Let's let the people decide here. So it sounds very fair, it sounds very democratic, it sounds very open. People are going to either say yes or no. So on August 19th, 1934, a referendum is held throughout Germany. The German people are going to go to the polls, just like we recently did, and they basically are voting, yes, we want Hitler to take over both political offices, or no, we do not. When the votes are counted, and back then, you got the paper ballots, so you're doing counting and whatever. When the votes are counted, 90% give a yes vote, an affirmative majority to Hitler. 90%. That's, I mean, you want to talk about a mandate in an election. You want to talk about a mandate in voting. 90% certainly is a mandate. But let's back up a second. Let's back up a second. So yes, I'm going and voting. I'm going to mark my ballot, yes or no. I'm going to do my part for the German government. I have my say so. But there's somebody looking over my shoulder. There's somebody watching. There's somebody monitoring. You know, we believe in the secrecy of an election, secret ballot. Nobody knows who you vote for, and you are not obligated to tell anybody who you vote for. You know, even your children, if they ask you, who did you vote for? Mom, who did you vote for? Dad? You don't even have to tell your children if you don't want to. You can keep it completely in your head and say nothing. Well, this election was not quite that secret. It was very closely watched. It was very closely monitored as the people went to the polls. It was quite clear that for the majority of people, they were going to know who voted yes and who voted no. And so very few people were willing to take a stand of no. 10%, I guess, were willing to take a stand of no against Hitler and say, no, we don't really think this is a good idea for you to have complete control and for your party to be in complete control. But when the votes are counted and it's out there, it's 90%. And, you know, Hitler can pat himself on the back and say, look, it's the will of the people. This is what they want. They told me this is what they wanted. So who can argue with me? He could share it with the world. He could share it with the other governments of the world if they cared. Look, the people said yes. They want me. They want me. It's kind of like, you know, Sally Field at the Oscars. They like me. They really like me, you know? And Hitler was very much about adulation. And again, you know, go to YouTube, find a clip of his speech, watch him speak, watch him get all emotional, and then look at members of the audience who are listening to him, and especially the women, swooning. Like he's some big Hollywood star. I mean, literally falling faint, swooning, throwing bouquets of flowers and things. And I know we look at him, we go, oh my God, really? How repulsive, how disgusting. And I agree with you. But you have to understand, he was selling them something they wanted. He was giving them something they wanted. And so they got caught up in the frenzy of it and in the whole idea of we're going to be great again. We're going to have what we didn't have, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Again, we could do a whole class for a couple of weeks on nothing but 1930 to 34, because there's so much going on. And I've just tried to summarize some of it because it gets very complicated. But nonetheless, by this point in 1934, Hitler has pretty much solidified himself as the leader. And so all the things that he talked about in Mein Kampf, his master Aryan race, as I said, we'll talk more about that next week, his, you know, anti-Semitism and his attitude toward Jews, and his attitude toward what it was going to mean for Germany to be great, what it was going to mean to have the 1,000-year Reich, was all now going to be able to come into play. You know, what it was once just in a pretty poorly written book is now going to start to become reality. And so he's at the point now where it was theory and now it can go into practice. All right, any questions here? And again, I would love to do a class sometime on the whole intricacies of it, but it gets really intricate. Yes, Larry.
Tim, the background for all of this worldwide is a depression.
Yes.
In which Germany was probably hardest hit among, you know, even worse than the United States, because they were basically coming out of the reparations for the war and, you know, all the sanctions against them and stuff like that. So was this, for, you know, I know Rena raised the question before about buying uniforms. Okay, that's, you know, let's say pocket change. Now we're buying guns and bullets and tanks and airplanes. Where did that come from? Was this when the industrialists in Germany?
Yes. In the late 20s, prior to the Depression, Germany had a couple of good years in the late 20s where industry was picking up, the industry was doing well, and that's why the Nazi Party sort of fell out of favor in the late 20s, because Germany was doing well economically. They were getting back on their feet. They didn't need somebody like the Nazis. So these industrialists who were doing well were able to then start ramping up again with the go-ahead from Hitler. We're going to militarize. We're going to need you to start, building supplies for the military, et cetera. So they were sinking their own money in because, again, they were going to be part of this new great, 1,000-year Reich. They were going to be part of this new great German empire that Hitler was promising them.
There was also some banks from the United States that supported him as well, weren't there?
There were, yes, and
Quite a few banks, New York banks that
there were some quite moneyed people in the country, in the United States, who supported him. It's amazing that there were people here who were looking across the sea. I mean, we were kind of in an isolationist mode, but there were some people paying attention and people looking at what he was doing in Germany. Now, remember, a lot hadn't happened yet regarding the Jews, et cetera, but saying, wow, look what he's doing over there. Look what he's succeeding in over there. Maybe we should take a page from his playbook and see what we can do, because he was being successful. He really was.
About 2 years ago, there was an Academy Award nominated short film called A Night at the Garden, which took place at Madison Square Garden. It was a little later. It was 1939, which was the largest Bund rally in the United States at the time. I think there were 30,000 Nazis that had demonstrated and marched and basically had speeches in front of Madison Square Garden, in front of a giant picture of George Washington. And if you look at those rallies, I mean, they basically replicated the Hitler rallies.
They did. They were swastikas, and they were looking at Germany and saying, look, this guy's doing some great stuff. Yes, question.
I do. What about Lindbergh? Was there any truth that Lindbergh was supporting him?
Yes. Yes, Charles Lindbergh did admire a great deal of what Hitler was doing. It really sort of stained his reputation as an American hero because he did some things and wrote some things that were in support of the Nazi government. And then there was Father Laughlin in Detroit, who had his weekly radio address, Catholic priest, who was very much a Nazi supporter. So
did Lindbergh go over there? Sorry, did Lindbergh?
I believe did actually. I believe that Lindbergh actually was given some sort of medal by Hitler. Yes. Yes, Jeff.
Okay. Lindbergh is a whole separate story, and I'm not going to bore everybody. They probably heard it from me before, but Lindbergh did go over there, but he went over there on behalf of the United States to scout out their airplanes. Major Smith was the one who set that up. He later became a lieutenant general in World War II. But Lindbergh's job was to go out there. He actually flew all the German airplanes. He came back to Smith and reported that their airplanes are way more advanced than ours, and cautioned and said, we have to start building up also. But a very interesting thing, you asked about the financing before. The financing was asked. Larry, in Ron Chernow's book, The House of Morgan, you learn all about international banking. And not the United States, France, and England were very much in favor of Germany repaying their war reparations. So they financed Germany's payments by giving them more credit and money. So it's very involved. There's no simple answer to it.
No.
Like
I said, we could do a whole class on just that.
Despite several different things, there was and then of course there was the American First Party, and all the United States, like you said, we were into isolationism, and up until the last couple of years, things started to change before Pearl Harbor. But, anyway, I'm not.
Okay. All right, Norm, did you?
Enough of that.
One of the one of the very important things that, which has been mentioned is the,
Oh, you lost your sound, Norm. You got to unmute yourself again. You got to unmute yourself, Norm. We're not hearing you. Uh-oh.
how's that?
There you go. Nope, nope. You're muted again. There you go.
Am I okay?
You're good now. Yes.
One of the important things for Hitler's success is his building program, which actually helped get them out of the Depression even before we did. The Autobahn program, which we copied back in the Eisenhower administration. He got people to work and
well, you're right. I mean, he was able to infrastructure in Germany, put people to work. And the Volkswagen was the people's car. Volkswagen means the people's vehicle, the people's car. And that came out of Germany, and Hitler put people to work in the auto manufacturing, building the Volkswagen.
And he built in the 1939-1940 World's Fair in New York, he built quite a building which sold Germany. And of course, the 1936 Olympics was.
Right. We'll be getting into a lot of that next time. Okay. Any other questions before we start talking about the Jews? Yes, Andrea.
Wasn't Britain's Neville Chamberlain also an admirer of Hitler? If not an admirer, he certainly didn't.
He wanted to work. He believed, the whole thing of appeasement. Let's just sort of appease him, give him a little something, appease him, then he'll be okay, and he'll quiet down, he'll calm down. That was kind of the thing that Chamberlain did. Did he really admire Hitler, or was he hoping that by appeasing him, sort of, get him to sort of shut up and be happy with what you have, kind of thing, which would have been great, but it didn't work that way either. People had no idea that Hitler really had a mission, and very little was going to stop him from getting there. All right, let's talk about the Jews, because all of this is going to come together in a very ugly mix in our next class and the class after that. So let's talk about the Jews in Germany. So we've seen how Hitler went from, pretty much, nothing, and now he's the dictator with the only legal party. We saw how Germany and the people in Germany felt demoralized after their loss in World War I, not wanting to accept the defeat of their great nation. So let's talk about the Jews who were living in Germany at this time. First of all, as you can see, you can't see. How many Jews were in Germany? The German Jewish population in 1910, so 1910, this is prior to World War I. But the figure of Jewish population in Germany in 1910 was put at 615,000. 615,000 Jewish people were living in Germany in 1910. Given the entire population of the German nation, that is slightly under 1%, under 1% of the entire population of the German nation. So they're not this humongous group. Other countries have much larger Jewish populations, including Poland, as we'll see. But they were 615,000, only about slightly under 1% of the population living in Germany. So, a little over 500,000. Now, the Jews who were living in Germany felt that they were completely 100% German. They had a feeling that they had been there for thousands of years, that they were part of Germany as much as anybody who was Catholic or who was Lutheran or who was of any other religious persuasion. They felt that they were as much a part of the country, they belonged in the country. Many of them considered themselves German first and Jewish second. So they put their loyalty to the government, to Germany. They put that first because they had been there and they were an active part of the nation. So, things looked like they were pretty good. In the years prior to World War I, the attitudes of other Germans toward the Jews were pretty open and liberal. There was not wide-ranging on the streets, open anti-Semitism. Oh, it existed, of course. It exists. There were some small things here and there, but it was not an openly, shouted on the streets. The Jews have to walk carefully. They walked proudly among their neighbors on the streets because they felt very much a part of the nation. They did not feel separate. They did not feel like they were others. They felt like they were very much a part of the country because Germany was considered a very enlightened nation. It was considered a very forward-thinking nation. It was considered to be, in fact, a model of forward thinking at the time. And Jews were just one of the groups that were represented inside the Greater Germany. Most German Jews in society were urban. This was not shtetl Jews like we would see in Eastern Europe. In Germany, the Jews were very much a part of the urban society on the streets of Germany, pretty much mingling very much with their neighbors who were non-Jewish, living in neighborhoods with their neighbors who were non-Jewish. They dressed modernly. They were well assimilated. I know the word assimilation can sometimes be used as a very bad thing, but they were well assimilated into daily life and going to market and doing the daily chores of life that everyone else in Germany was doing. They were just among those people doing the same thing. So they didn't feel like there was anything to be afraid of. And in fact, they said, look, we fought for Germany in World War I. We willingly went and we fought for the country of Germany in World War I. 12,000 German Jewish soldiers died. 12,000 died in service to Germany during World War I. That was the highest ethnic group of any group in Germany. 12,000 German deaths in World War I, the highest of any other ethnic group in Germany. So, we're supporting our country. We have a good life here. We're supporting it. We feel good about volunteering our services to help protect Germany. Okay. So Jews were involved in politics. Jews were involved in diplomacy in Germany. Jews were very much, helping to try to keep the country together. During the years after the war, they stepped up and said, what can we do? Our country is floundering, but what can we do to help the country to get back on its feet? They weren't expecting anyone else to do anything for them. They were willing to get in there and do whatever they could to make the country great. They were safe. The Jews in Germany felt very safe. They attended universities. The universities were open to Jews. They had no real issues getting into universities for degrees. They studied for professional degrees. During the time period before Hitler and in the 20s and 30s, 17 German Jews won Nobel Prizes. So the Jews were well represented here. 17 German Jews won Nobel Prizes. Flossie.
What was it that Hitler had against the Jews and he used them as a scapegoat?
Oh, the age-old question of why. Yes, it's a great question. It gets asked a lot.
Same.
Jews were, first of all, they're a small, you want to pick out a part of the population that's not huge, first of all. So you pick out a smaller percentage, and Jews were, as we saw, 1%. And then there are different theories that when Hitler's mother died, the Jewish doctor who treated her didn't do all he could to save her, so that Hitler blamed the Jewish doctor, which turned into an anti-Semitic thing. When he was rejected from art school and Jewish students were accepted, that made him start to look sideways at Jews, like, why could they get in? Why could I not get in? I mean, those are all different theories that you can read, you can talk about, you can discuss. And then there's the theory that Hitler himself was Jewish, which I think has pretty much been disproved by now, that that is not true. So it wasn't like a self-hatred kind of thing. I don't have a solid answer other than if you're going to pick, when he's trying to formulate his, and he certainly fought alongside brave Jewish soldiers in World War I, since they were very well represented in the military, and Hitler was in the military. You have to pick out somebody who is a smaller group, who does not have the ability to raise massive numbers of people to rise up against the government or rise up against what you're saying. And certainly the Jews fit that as being less than 1% of the population. And what other things were going on? Anti-Semitism has existed in Europe for centuries. And it was something that Hitler probably was aware of. He could build on that by picking out a group of people and trying to resurrect that. The protocols of the elders of Zion had been printed, which is the whole, anti-Jewish diatribe of Jews trying to control the money and control the world. Though it was not widely distributed and really well read, it was out there and Hitler could pick up on that. There was a so-called scientist, sociologist, whatever, Wilhelm Marr, who was extremely anti-Semitic. He was one of the first who ever declared the Jews as a separate race, and Hitler got a hold of his writings as well so that they could be separate. So there's all kinds of theories out there, all kinds of theories. I'm not sure which are the most accurate, which are the ones that really have some merit to them and which don't. But that's what I know. If anybody wants to throw something else out there, go ahead.
Oh, of course, Sarah, is the church.
Yeah, go ahead. We can hear you.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
The Lutheran Church was, for years, was part of it. The Jews killed Christ story, which, of course, it might have been Hitler's biggest mistake, because all the scientists which came over in the 30s, which could have supported his war effort.
Yeah, I mean, there is certainly Christian anti-Semitism at work from the Catholic Church, the Lutheran Church. We know that too.
It also fed into his philosophy of racial purity,
Right.
that they were outsiders and that they were not part of the, this Teutonic myth, the one that Wagner had, propagated with, all of the legends, of the Norwegian mythology, of the strong men and all of these gods and goddesses that they were descended from. And these people were outsiders, just like the gypsies were outsiders at the time, just like the blacks were outsiders, the Negroes were outsiders. So I think that fed into it nicely as well.
I mean, we're gonna, like I said, we're gonna talk a little bit more about his racial theory attitudes next week.
Can I build on that a minute? Can I build on that a minute?
Yes.
Can I build on that a minute?
Sure. Go ahead.
The 20s was the rise of eugenics worldwide as well, including.
Yes. We're going to talk about that next week as well.
All right.
No, that's okay. It's hard to separate these things out. That's what makes doing this, because like everything interplays with everything, because it all contributes to what happened and ultimately leads us toward the Holocaust. So yeah, I mean, all of these things are playing in Hitler's mind, and ultimately decides to make the Jews his #1 targets, not his only target, but certainly his #1 targets of his, bizarre theories. So yes, we're going to touch on all of those things. We talk about his racial theories next week, the eugenics, the master race theory, and all of that kind of thing. Okay, let's try to finish up here with the Jews in Germany. Just what Jews in Germany, if they went to court in Germany, they had cases decided in their favor. They were looked upon like other citizens. It wasn't that, oh, you're a Jew, so we're going to decide against you. That wasn't happening in Germany. Jews did not really, there were really few signs in Germany that the Jews needed to feel like they needed to be afraid, They felt safe. They felt secure. They felt like they really were contributing to the greater good. And even when the whole business of nationalism started to rear its head. They said, but we're part of the nation. We are part of the nation. And they pointed to their record in Nobel Prizes, and they pointed to their record in fighting in World War I. They pointed to their record of being integral to the success of Germany and said, we're a part of this nation. They wanted Germany to be a great country as well. It wasn't like the Jews were sitting back and said, well, you know, we really don't care about Germany. We really don't care if Germany is great again. We don't. We want Germany to be a world power. We want Germany to have a place on the world stage again, like it once did. And so we are willing to do our part to contribute to making Germany great. So they had very little reason to really fear that everything was all of a sudden going to turn the tables on them. And as I said earlier, people ultimately were not taking Hitler seriously. He wasn't winning elections. His party wasn't getting a majority of people in the government and representatives in the government. He was sort of considered a sort of second-rate player on the stage. Oh yeah, he had his followers, but never to the idea that he was ever going to get a majority, and he never did get a majority. So a lot of people were like, okay, so he's a little out there, he's a little crazy. And as I said, people never really took seriously that he was going to do the things that he outlines in Mein Kampf. They just didn't believe that he was going to do it. Maybe because they didn't want to believe, or because it sounded so outlandish. Sometimes we don't want to believe things that are so utterly outlandish. But the Jews in Germany really felt like they were secure. They felt like they had no reason to fear the government. They had no reason to fear that things were going to all of a sudden turn very, very horribly against them. As we know they do, and they will, and that's where we're going to kind of pick up with next week, is then once Hitler's solidified in power, the tables begin to turn, and they begin to turn rather rapidly, you know, from, okay, I'm doing everything legally to solidify my power, now you're going to see just what I'm capable of. So that's kind of where we are as we are at 1933, 1934 is kind of where we are right now. Hitler is firmly in control. Jewish people feeling like they don't have a great deal to worry about. Germany is remilitarizing. The economy in Germany is going well. And, you know, everything looks, on the surface at least, like it's going to be okay. Comments, questions, ideas, theories,
Just wanted to mention one other factor at the time was also the German imperialism, the fact that they were looking to expand worldwide, going into Africa and to many other parts of the world to move their population. They saw a burgeoning population growth, I think, at the same time, and they wanted to go into countries that, you know, to become colonial empire.
There's a lot of factors at work in the world at this point. Anybody else, questions, comments, or just anything that just totally surprised you, or that you, whatever. I'm open to comments. Yes, Rena.
No, I just wanted to mention that, remember, my grandparents came from Austria, but early, like in the 1910 or whatever that was. And two of my grandfather's sisters moved to Yorktown, New York, and they considered themselves German, like almost like Nazis, even though they were Jewish, because they didn't at the time see the difference.
Right.
There was a very strong community in New York and Yorktown at the time. And they moved there, and they were very, very, very staunch German, even though they left Germany, you know, to come here.
Well, we weren't,
you know, at that time.
Right, at that point, it wasn't at the point where they had to fear that all of a sudden there was going to be a turning of the tables against the Jews in Germany. So they felt strongly, you know, as many people who came here from other countries still, you know, felt strongly about their national identities. I mean, the Italians and the Poles and the Irish and whatever, many of them suffered hard times when they got here, but ultimately, you know, became a part of the fabric of the American nation. And, you know, so rightly so, they came here proudly from Germany, German culture, German background. And so there was no reason for them
Correct.
they shouldn't be proud of it. There was no reason at this point.
German Jews had a superiority complex in this country against, as compared to the Ashkenazis. I mean, we're German Jews.
Right. And you have to remember that in Germany, as I said, Germany was not like many of the Eastern European. You did not have the shtetl Jews. The German Jews were by and large much more modern, living in the cities. And most of them were Reform Jews. Most of them were not Orthodox. German Jews were by and large Reform Jews. People forget that Reform Judaism started in Germany. It flourished and flowered here in the United States of America. But the beginnings of Reform Judaism, where there would be organ music in the synagogues and men and women would sit together, and a lot of the trappings of what seemed to be almost Christian type of worship services, all of that started in Germany because Germany had this forward thinking. We want to look like our neighbors. We want to worship like our neighbors. We don't want to be so set apart. We don't want it to be that much different. So when they go to church, we go to synagogue, but it's going to be a similar kind of experience. And we're shortening the service, and we're not going to be there for 3 hours, etc. We're going to have an hour and a half or whatever. So most of the German Jews were of this new sort of modern, still getting off the ground Reform movement. And they were not these Orthodox, Jews. So I have a cat. If it looks like I'm moving around, it's because I have a cat at my feet who's bugging me. Who wants my attention? Like, stop talking and pay attention.
We could see him. We can see him.
Oh, he does not. He does not really like to be held very much, but he wants my attention anyway. So, anybody else? Any questions, comments? Yes, Floss.
Jim, I want to thank you. I knew certain things you had discussed, but you explained it in a very logical, good way. And you also had a lot of things I never heard about. So thank you very much for your research.
You're welcome. And as I said, I would whole semesters of college courses on this subject because it's so vast, and to try to condense it, is difficult. Here, I'll see if I can show you. Here.
Yeah. Oh, hi.
Beautiful.
Look at those eyes.
That's Barry. Oh, you want to get down? Okay, you can get down. There you go. Yes, he's a good cat, but when he wants attention, he wants attention. So, anybody else? Thank you all for being part of this.
Thank you, Tim.
Next week it's going to get a little worse because we're going to start moving into the early years of the anti-Semitism, and again, Hitler, not legally, well, I guess legally he's the only party, but he's very methodical. The one thing that you can't take away from Hitler is he does this very methodically, as you will see next week, as he steps up the program against Jews and others in Germany. He has a program in the back of his mind. He follows it to get him to where he wants to go. So you'll see how that works next week. But thank you, everybody. Have a great evening. Enjoy the rest
Thank
of
you, Tim.
the evening. I don't know what's going on weather-wise there, but don't float away. See you next week. If you have any questions during the week or up until next week, feel free to email me at the temple through my email or give me a call. You'll get everything for next week's class. I'll send out on Monday to everybody.
Same links, Tim.
Yeah, same Zoom link. So the same link you use for tonight will be good for the next 2 classes as well. But I'll send a reminder of that on Monday as well, so everybody knows. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Good night, everybody.
Bye. Good night.